I want to talk about the word I, the capital letter I that refers to one's identity. The problem that we're dealing with is that we think that the word I refers to a sense of self that has to do with the body and the mind and the emotions, and is really just consciousness being reflected in the mind. In Sanskrit, the word is ahamkara, which means I maker, and it's just the ego. Ego is really not a problem unless we are confused and think that the reflection of consciousness in the mind is who we are, and that's all we are. It's like the sun reflected in a pond. The sun is not in the pond. There's no sun in the pond. It has no substance of itself. It's merely a reflection of the reality of what we're calling the sun. Our true nature is consciousness, and it's reflected in the mind. And there is a sense of self that goes with that. It's an illusion in a similar way that we think the sun in the pond is a real sun. Most of us would see the sun reflected in a pond and realize that it's just a reflection, and we wouldn't literally think the sun is in the pond. So if the sun is a symbol of the absolute reality, the I am that we are, just as an analogy, the reality of who we are is reflected in the mind in a similar way that the sun can be reflected in a pond. And if you understand what the reality is and what the reflection is, then you're not going to be confused. The confusion that we have is in thinking that the consciousness that's reflected in the mind is who we are. And that's not who we are. We are consciousness, and consciousness is reflected in the mind. In a similar way, as long as you understand that sunlight that's reflected off of a surface is the sun being reflected and not a source of light in itself, the source of light is the sun. The reflection's not the source of light. The sun is the source of light. The reflected light has power only to the degree that the sun is producing it. So, our true nature is pure consciousness. And that's who we are. And it's everywhere and everything. It's being reflected everywhere in the world. The world is the outpicturing of our mind, and the sun, if you will, the sun of our consciousness is reflected everywhere. So consciousness is who or what we are. It's reflected everywhere. As long as we understand that what we're calling the world is merely a reflection of who we are, we don't suffer from that. It may sound solipsistic. Now, solipsism is a philosophical view that I'm the only one that exists, and it's considered an absurd view that no one really takes seriously. It only sounds solipsistic if we confuse who we are as consciousness with the mind. So the consciousness is reflected in the mind, and we call that ego, and we think that's who we are, but we're attaching to the mind and not realizing that the only reality it has is because it's being reflected from our true nature, and that's the source of it. Like if you see your face reflected in a mirror, is the face that's reflected in the mirror your face, literally? No. The face that's reflected in the mirror has no substance. It's a reflection of the reality we're calling your face. And as long as you understand that the reflection is a reflection and not the reality, you're fine. If you see your face reflected in the mirror and you think that the reflected face is your actual face, literally on its side, like that's you, you don't realize that there's this reality in a sense that we're calling your face. You think that the reflection is literally your face. You don't realize it's a reflection. Like, oh, that face is real. It's being produced from its side, as it were, and has its own reality, its own substance, its own power. That's reality. That's my face over there. I'm completely ignorant of the actual face, the reality that's just who I am. in that sense, in the physical sense. Physical face, reflected face. So if our true nature is consciousness, and consciousness is reflected in the mind, if we think that the consciousness that's reflected in the mind is who we are, then that's like thinking the face in the mirror is who we are. It's not who we are. It's a reflection of who we are. See, a reflection of something's not a problem as long as you realize it's a reflection of something. There's a reality, and then there's the reflection of the reality. So when we see the sun reflected in the pond, we're like, oh, there's the sun, and there's its reflection in the pond. We understand the difference between the two, and it's fine. It doesn't cause a problem. The problem arises if we think the reflected sun is the sun, and we're not aware of the reality of the actual sun. Then we live in the reflection, and it's like a hallucination or a mirage. So ego is an attribution of self to the reflection of consciousness in the mind. So I'm aware of a sense of self, and I'm also aware of my true nature as consciousness, and that whatever reality the body, mind, or emotions appears to have is merely a reflection of that consciousness in the mind. So it's not a problem because it doesn't have any substance of its own. If we're in a dark room, let's say we're a child, we wake up in the middle of the night and we see some clothes hanging on a clothes hook in the corner of the room. And in the darkness, we think that that's a person lurking there. That's the boogeyman. And our mind is creating that. It's a false attribution. It doesn't have any power. It doesn't have any reality as a boogeyman. That's all up here. If we turn the light on, we see that it's just clothes hanging on a hook. And we're relieved because we're just seeing reality. We're just like, oh, okay, that's what it is. I thought it was one thing, but the reality is revealed by the light. In a similar way, when we investigate ego, we're investigating this false attribution of self to a reflection of consciousness in the mind. I mean, it's clear that humans have intelligence. It's clear that some humans have intelligence. No, actually, we all have intelligence. Everyone has some degree of intelligence. That intelligence is merely the reflection of consciousness in the mind, and that's what makes it possible. If sunlight is shining through the window into a room and we can see our way around, all of that is the sun. All of it that makes it possible is sunlight. The objects, let's just say they don't emit light. There aren't any LEDs or anything. We're in a room without any electricity. All the light being reflected back is sunlight. And generally we realize that. We wouldn't see anything if it weren't for sunlight. In a similar way, we are that consciousness that shines in the mind or reflects in the mind, makes the world appear real. By real, I mean the sense that it has an independent power. Like the face in the mirror, if we see our face in a mirror, we realize that face doesn't have any independent power. It moves, it has expressions. It's just a reflection of what's going on here. And the error would be in thinking that the face in the mirror has its own power when we're the ones doing it. It is nothing more than the reflection of who we are. So ego is really this false belief, just like the clothes hanging on a hook in the corner of the room that scares a child because they think it's a boogeyman. We think that the consciousness shining in the mind has its own power. Consciousness has its own power, but the reflection doesn't have its own power. The source of it, the power, the reality is consciousness itself, and we are that. So we illumine everything before us, and everything that appears is our own illumination and is our own truth, our own being reflected. Now, I mentioned solipsism. Solipsism is this philosophical idea. It's a ridiculous idea. I don't think anyone who's the least bit sane believes this. But solipsism is this idea. It's almost more like a false philosophical conclusion. Someone will say, oh, that's solipsism. And it's a way of trying to cut down your argument, your philosophical argument. If your philosophical argument, whichever system you're using, if your conclusion leads to this idea that you're the only person that exists and everyone else does not exist, that's what we call solipsism. So that's a confusion between the mind and consciousness. Minds are separate in the sense that I can say I have my own mind, my own thoughts, and generally speaking, I don't know what's going on in your mind. I don't know your thoughts. So those, you could say, are separate. Like we have different bodies, different minds, different emotions. So you're over there, you're a person. Great. I'm here, I'm a person. Those are all descriptions, and I'm using the mind to do that. So they're not ultimately real, but they're just functional descriptions of how we function in the world with a body and a mind and emotion. So as a person, the person is the physical, emotional, and mental. Taken all together is the person. In Sanskrit, that's called jiva, the jiva. It's the individual, the person. So as persons, we're separate, we're different, functionally distinct. Forget about the absolute distinctions. Like the number 1 and the number 2 are separate, just in mathematics. Is that ultimately true? We're not talking about that. We're talking about just how to function in the world. Like pepper and salt are different. If someone says pass the salt, my mother told me that when someone says pass the salt, it's bad manners not to pass the pepper with the salt. That you want the pepper and the salt to go together. But the salt is white and pepper is black. So they're different. They do different things functionally. They activate flavors differently. They're different. And that's just a functional difference. So I'm over here, you're over there, meaning as a jiva, I'm over here. As a person, you're over there. To go to the absolute level of who we are pure consciousness, and there's only one. It is absolute and universal, and that's who we are. So as consciousness, I'm over here and over there, in a sense, as you. The substance, the truth, the power, the reality of identity, whether we're talking about people, places, things, worlds, objects, anything, the only reality is consciousness. Consciousness itself. Solipsism is the idea that I have my own mind and my own person. I am my own person, and that's the only real person, the only real mind. So like your mind doesn't exist, no minds exist, no other people exist. You're all just figments of my imagination as a person. That's insane. And rightly so. And if someone says, I've heard it said that the philosophical conclusions of these kinds of teachings like Advaita Vedanta, Buddhism, where there's this notion of one reality, nondual reality, that's solipsistic in some way. It's not merely because we're not talking about minds. We're not talking about persons. When we say it's one, and there's only one reality, we're talking about what Joel Goldsmith calls the infinite invisible, namely God, truth, reality. We're saying it's pure consciousness. That's a convenient way to look at it. We are the I am, the sense of being is aware. Its nature is to be aware. There's one, but we have different minds. So we need to realize, to make this make sense, that as individuals we're different, but as consciousness itself, there's one. And it's invisible and it's infinite. Omniscient, omnipresent, all of that. So if I say we're all one, there's one consciousness, one reality, appearing as different people and objects and worlds and so on, that's fine because it's similar to having a dream and everything in the dream is you. You may experience different people, places, and things in the dream. When you wake up, you realize that everything in the dream was just your mind. And you were everything in it. The only substance that was in that dream was you. All of it. There wasn't one thing in that dream that wasn't you. So, in a similar way, the world that we experience is no different from the I am that we are. And we feel different, we appear different. You're over there, I'm over here. That's undeniable. The experience of that's undeniable. And functionally speaking, it's important to acknowledge that we are different persons. And the truth of that is consciousness. If the sun is shining in a room and there's, say, 1,000 different objects, and maybe these objects are polished metal with different facets, or they could be jewels, but they reflect a lot of light. There are going to be thousands of those. There's one light appearing as thousands of objects. Maybe even they're rotating, they're moving, like a mobile that they hang over the crib of an infant. So they're entertained by the turning figures and shapes and colors. It's interesting. There's one light. Appearing as all of that is a way to look at it. So we are that light. So it's one source, one truth. The realization of that is freedom. And part of that is realizing that the independently existing world is an illusion because it's not independent. It would be like looking in the mirror and seeing your face and thinking the face in the mirror is independent of you. Sometimes I reference the movie Evil Dead 2. It's either Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, I forget. They're both crazy madcap horror films. I find them interesting, though. There's a scene where Ash, the hero of Evil Dead, is looking in the mirror. And he's going nuts because the place is haunted. And he's kind of losing his mind. And he's looking in the mirror and looking at himself. And his reflection in the mirror starts moving independently of him and reaches through and tries to strangle him and pull him through into another dimension or something. And it's crazy. And it's horrifying. I mean, that would be horrifying if you look in the mirror and your reflection tried to kill you. The fact is, though, the reflection in the mirror doesn't have its own power. And it's scary and ridiculous in that movie because we know that, and it's weird to see a man's reflection attacking him through the mirror. So although we appear separate, we are not ultimately separate. And the reason we attack each other is this confusion about who we are. When we realize the truth of who we are and that we're all emanations of the one consciousness that is, and that is our identity, we just fall in love. There's nothing missing and no reason to attack or defend or blame or lie or cheat or steal. We haven't realized that in any major sense yet. So in the sense of history and time and evolution, yeah, we're still in our infancy. We're still killing each other. It's ridiculous. But that's just the appearance. The truth of who we are is in a timeless dimension and is utterly free of violence and fear and wars and all of that. In a similar way that when you wake up from a dream, you may be dreaming of a violent scene or a war or something. As soon as you wake up, it's gone. And you realize its source. It's a reflection of your own consciousness in the mind projected into this world, appearing in a dream that appears real and seems real when you're dreaming and is gone when you wake up. It is very similar to that. And it's beautiful. There's nothing scary about it, except this belief that the dream is real, that it has its own power, like a horror movie. It could be a beautiful fantasy until it turns into a horror movie, because when we attribute independent power to a dream world, it takes over. We lose control because it's an illusion that we've given substance to. It's an illusion created by the mind. When we wake up, we just realize that there's only one truth, one power, one essence. And it's utterly sane. It's not solipsistic because Saying that consciousness is one is like saying there's one ocean appearing as many waves. It's just the ocean.